The wolves should have torn her apart. 12 massive predators. 12 sets of glowing silver eyes. 12 reasons an abandoned Omega girl should never have survived the night. Yet beneath a sky drowning in snow and darkness, the wolves weren't hunting her. They were guarding her. And somewhere beyond the frozen mountains, the most feared Alpha King in the north suddenly rose from his throne after feeling something impossible. A bond. A heartbeat. A presence. The prophecy he had spent years trying to forget had just awakened. And before sunrise, an entire kingdom would learn a terrifying truth. The Monster King had found his mate. The only problem? She had no idea who he was. And far worse, she had no idea that powerful people were already planning her destruction. Winter ruled the northern wilderness like a merciless god. The world had disappeared beneath endless white. Mountains vanished behind storms. Forests became shadows trapped beneath ice. Even the moon struggled to pierce the blizzard consuming the sky. And somewhere within that frozen wasteland, a girl opened her eyes. Pain greeted her first. Sharp. Burning. Every muscle in her body screamed. Cold dug beneath her skin like knives. For several seconds, she couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't remember. Snow covered half her body. Ice crystals clung to pale eyelashes. Her lips trembled as she struggled to inhale. The wind answered with a howl. Elara Frost gasped. The sound echoed through the forest. Then silence followed. A terrible silence. The kind that made instinct scream. Slowly, she pushed herself upright. Snow slid from her shoulders. Her vision blurred. The world swayed. And that was when she saw them. 12 wolves. Giant. Monstrous. Impossible. They stood in a perfect circle around her. Watching. Waiting. Their silver eyes glowed against the darkness. Elara froze. Every drop of blood seemed to turn to ice. The largest wolf stood directly ahead. Its shoulders were nearly level with her chest, even while standing on 4 legs. Its thick black fur moved beneath the storm winds like living shadows. Predators. Every single one. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Run. The instinct exploded through her body. Run now. Before they kill you. Before they smell your fear. Before. None of the wolves moved. Not one. Elara swallowed hard. The silence felt wrong. Dangerously wrong. Predators attacked. Predators hunted. Predators killed. These wolves simply stared, as though waiting for something. Or someone. A shiver crawled down her spine. Slowly, carefully, she took 1 step backward. The wolves remained still. Another step. Nothing. Confusion replaced some of the fear. Then she turned. And ran. Snow exploded beneath her feet. Branches whipped across her face. The freezing air burned her lungs. Panic drove her forward. Faster. 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 Yet no matter how hard she ran, she felt them behind her. Not chasing. Following. Watching. Protecting. The realization terrified her more than pursuit ever could. Hours passed. The storm intensified. Darkness thickened. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction. Exhaustion eventually forced Elara to stop. She leaned against a frozen tree, breathing hard, shaking uncontrollably. And there they were, the wolves, standing at the edge of the clearing, silent, patient, like guardians or jailers. "I don't understand," she whispered. The words disappeared into the wind. One of the wolves stepped forward. Elara immediately tensed. Fear tightened every muscle. But instead of attacking, the animal lowered its massive head, almost like a bow. The gesture felt impossible, unnatural. The wolf backed away again, returning to the others. The storm suddenly shifted. The wind changed direction, and every wolf lifted its head simultaneously, listening. Their ears twitched, bodies stiffened. Something was coming. Something powerful. Something that made even monsters pay attention. Far away, beyond mountains and forests, thunder echoed. No. Not thunder. Hooves. Hundreds of them. Miles away, inside Moonfang Kingdom, darkness ruled the royal castle. Black stone towers pierced the clouds. Torches burned along massive walls. Snow swirled through courtyards where soldiers trained despite the freezing night. At the highest tower, a man stood before an ancient table covered in maps and forgotten scrolls. King Kael Dreadfang, the Alpha King, the Beast of the North. The ruler whispered about in fear across kingdoms. Power surrounded him like a living thing. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in black fur and silver armor. Scars crossed his hands. His jaw remained permanently tense. Years of war had carved coldness into his face. Yet, tonight something had changed. His entire body stood rigid. A strange sensation gripped his chest. Not pain, not fear, something far more dangerous. Hope. The emotion felt unfamiliar, unwelcome, ancient. A royal scholar trembled nearby. The prophecy, the old man whispered. Kael's silver eyes narrowed. Read it again. The scholar swallowed. His hands shook as he opened the ancient parchment. The moon-blessed Omega shall awaken beneath winter's final storm. Silence filled the room. The wolves of the crown shall find her first. Kael's pulse quickened. The forgotten daughter shall carry the mark of silver moonlight. The room seemed smaller, colder. The Alpha King shall kneel before her. Those words struck like a blade. Kael looked away. His expression darkened instantly. No king kneels. The scholar hesitated, then continued. Unless destiny demands it. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. The bond inside Kael's chest pulsed again. Stronger this time. He felt her. Somewhere. Alive. Waiting. The impossible realization crashed through him. After years. After all the death. After losing everything. His mate existed. His wolf knew it. His soul knew it. And for the first time in many years, his heart knew it too. Prepare my horse. The command echoed through the chamber. The scholar blinked. Your Majesty? Kael turned toward the door. The cold king had disappeared. In his place stood something primal. Something determined. Something dangerous. She's out there. The storm was beginning to die when dawn finally approached. Pale silver light spread across the frozen wilderness. Elara sat beside a fallen tree, too exhausted to continue. The wolves still surrounded her. Still watching. Still waiting. Then suddenly every wolf stood. Alert. Focused. The air changed. A strange tension swept through the forest. The ground vibrated. Hooves. Many hooves. Closer now. Elara rose shakily. Fear returned immediately. Moments later, riders emerged through the snow. Hundreds. Armored warriors carrying silver banners. Massive war wolves moved alongside them. The entire forest seemed to bow before their arrival. At the center rode a single figure. Black armor. Silver eyes. Power so overwhelming it felt physical. The man dismounted slowly. The wolves immediately lowered their heads. Every warrior followed. The forest became completely silent. Elara stared, confused, terrified. The stranger approached. One step, then another. His gaze locked onto hers. The connection struck instantly. Like lightning, like fate, like something neither of them could stop. Kael stopped only a few feet away. For several endless seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then something impossible happened. The Alpha King dropped to one knee. Gasps erupted from hundreds of soldiers. Shock spread across the clearing. No one had ever seen their king kneel. Not once. Not ever. Yet there he was. Before an abandoned Omega. Kael lowered his head. His voice emerged deep and powerful. You have been found. Elara couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't understand. The king lifted his gaze. And before every witness present, he declared the words that would change both their lives forever. You are my chosen mate. The world stopped. Silence consumed everything. Then suddenly pain exploded beneath Elara's collarbone. She cried out. A silver crescent mark blazed beneath her skin. Glowing. Burning. Awakening. The wolves threw back their heads. And every wolf in the forest began howling. As the sound echoed across the mountains, Kael stared at the glowing mark.
because he recognized it.
And the expression on the Alpha King's face revealed a terrifying truth. The prophecy was even worse than he feared. The howls did not stop. They rolled across the mountains like a living storm. Ancient. Primal.
Terrifying.
The sound seemed to shake the frozen world itself. Elara stood motionless in the snow while the silver mark beneath her collarbone burned with unnatural light. Pain radiated through her chest. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Around her, hundreds of warriors remained kneeling. Not before their king. Before her. The sight made no sense. Nothing about this made sense. She was nobody. An abandoned Omega. A forgotten girl. A mistake the world had spent years trying to erase. Yet now the most powerful army in the north bowed its head in her presence. Fear twisted inside her stomach. Because power had never brought safety. Only danger. Only suffering. Only people wanting something from her. The Alpha King slowly rose. Snow drifted across his broad shoulders. His silver eyes never left her face. For a moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. No soldiers. No wolves. No storm. Only the strange, invisible thread stretching between them. A connection neither understood. A connection neither could ignore. Then reality returned. Kael's expression hardened instantly. The vulnerable flicker vanished. The Monster King returned. Prepare the carriage. His command shattered the silence. The soldiers immediately obeyed. Elara stepped backward.
No.
Every head turned toward her. The king's gaze sharpened. No, he repeated. I don't know you. Her voice trembled despite her efforts. I don't belong here. The cold wind carried her words away. Kael studied her carefully. Not as a king. Not as a ruler. But as a man confronting something precious and dangerous. Something he feared touching. You were dying in the wilderness. I survived. Barely. The truth hurt. Because he wasn't wrong. She had been close to death. Very close. Still, pride kept her standing. Years of surviving alone had taught her one lesson. Trust no one. Especially powerful men. Especially kings. Especially monsters wearing crowns. Kael seemed to recognize the fear inside her. Something strange flickered across his expression.
Pain.
The emotion disappeared so quickly she wondered if she imagined it. Then his voice softened. Only slightly. Come with me. The words sounded less like an order. More like a request. That frightened him far more than it frightened her. Because Alpha Kings did not ask. They commanded. Yet somehow this girl kept making him forget who he was supposed to be. Elara hesitated. The wolves watched. The soldiers waited. The entire kingdom seemed suspended in that single moment. Then another blast of freezing wind cut through the clearing. Her body shivered violently. Exhaustion finally won. She lowered her eyes. And nodded. The journey to Moonfang Castle lasted 2 days. 2 very uncomfortable days. Elara spent most of them inside a heavily guarded carriage. The kingdom unfolded outside the windows like a dream carved from ice. Frozen rivers. Snow-covered villages. Black forests stretching beyond sight. Everywhere they traveled, people stopped.
Watched.
Whispered. Word spread quickly. The Alpha King had found his mate. And she was an Omega. A nameless Omega. Shock moved faster than the royal procession. By the time they reached the capital, rumors had already become legends. Moonfang Castle rose from the mountains like a giant carved from darkness. Its black towers pierced storm clouds. Massive walls wrapped around the cliffs. Silver banners snapped violently in the wind. The sight stole Elara's breath. Beautiful.
Terrifying.
Lonely. Just like its king. The gates opened. The procession entered. And the whispers began immediately. Servants froze. Guards exchanged glances. Nobles stared openly. The judgment felt familiar. Painfully familiar. Elara had seen those looks her entire life. Too pale. Too strange. Too different. Unwanted. The old wounds immediately reopened. Kael noticed. His jaw tightened. A dangerous growl nearly escaped his throat. The reaction shocked him. Why did their opinions matter? Why did her pain anger him? Why did every instinct scream at him to protect her? He hated the answers, because they revealed weakness, and weakness had already destroyed his life once. That evening, Moonfang Castle gathered for the royal banquet. Thousands of candles illuminated the enormous hall. Golden chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Music echoed through the air. Nobles filled long tables. Yet beneath the beauty lurked tension. Everyone watched Elara. Every movement, every breath, every mistake. Waiting, judging, hunting. At the far end of the hall sat Kael, upon his throne, silent, dangerous, untouchable. And beside him sat Elara. The position alone felt like a death sentence. The whispers grew louder. Some tried hiding them. Others didn't bother. She's just an Omega. Look at her. A servant would be more suitable. The king has lost his mind. The words stabbed deeper than blades. Elara lowered her gaze. Years of rejection rushed back. The memories hurt. The loneliness hurt. The shame hurt. Then suddenly silence spread through the hall. Every noble froze. Kael had stood.
Slowly.
Deliberately. The room immediately became colder. More dangerous. His silver eyes swept across the crowd. Predatory. Lethal. Anyone foolish enough to meet his gaze quickly looked away. Anyone who insults her again. His voice remained calm. That made it worse. Far worse. Will answer directly to me. The threat landed like thunder. Nobody doubted him. Not a single person. Kael Dreadfang never made empty threats. The banquet continued. But nobody spoke again. Elara stared at him.
Confused.
Why protect her? Why care? Why risk his authority for someone he barely knew? Across the hall, another pair of eyes watched the exchange.
Cold.
Calculating. Jealous. Lady Seraphine Vare, the king's closest advisor, and the woman who had spent 3 years believing she would eventually become queen. Her smile never faded, but something ugly moved behind it. Something poisonous. Something dangerous. The arrival of Elara Frost had shattered years of planning, and Seraphine did not tolerate obstacles. The days that followed changed Moonfang Castle. At first, nobody noticed. Then suddenly everyone did. Wounded soldiers recovered faster. Arguments ended peacefully. Servants smiled more. The wolves roaming the castle grounds became calmer. Even the atmosphere felt lighter, warmer, as if spring itself had somehow entered winter. The center of every change remained the same. Elara. The effect terrified some people, inspired others, and fascinated Kael. Night after night, he found himself watching her. Not intentionally. At least that was what he told himself. Yet somehow his eyes always found her. In the gardens, in the library, among the wolves. She treated everyone with kindness, even those who despised her. Especially those who despised her. It made no sense. Strength he understood. Power he respected. Cruelty he expected. But kindness? Kindness confused him, because he had forgotten it existed. One night, Kael awoke suddenly, breathing hard. Sweat covered his skin. For years nightmares had haunted him. Always the same.
Blood. Death.
Failure. His former mate dying in his arms. Every night. Every year. Every memory. Yet, tonight, there had been nothing. No nightmares. No ghosts. Only peace. The realization unsettled him, because the last thing he remembered before sleeping was Elara's laughter echoing through the castle courtyard. And somehow that sound had followed him into his dreams. Days later, Seraphine entered the royal archives. Alone.
Silent.
Determined. Dust floated through ancient sunlight. Forgotten histories lined endless shelves. She searched for hours, then finally found what she wanted. A hidden family record. An ancient bloodline registry. Her eyes scanned the faded pages. Suddenly, she stopped. The smile slowly disappeared from her face, then returned, much darker than before, much more dangerous, because written inside those forgotten records was a name, a bloodline, a secret. And if the information was true, Elara Frost was descended from one of the kingdom's greatest enemies. Seraphine's heart raced, not with fear, with opportunity. She carefully closed the book, already planning, already calculating, already imagining Elara's downfall. Meanwhile, far above the archives, Elara stood alone on a castle balcony. Moonlight painted her pale hair silver. The wind danced across her skin. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. Hope. And behind her, unnoticed in the shadows, Kael watched quietly, unable to leave, unable to approach, unable to stop thinking about her. Because every day the bond grew stronger, and every day resisting it became harder. Then suddenly pain flashed through his chest. Sharp, violent, ancient. The same warning his wolf gave before disaster. Kael's eyes narrowed instantly. Somewhere inside the castle, someone had just made their first move against his mate, and neither of them knew how dangerous the game had become. Waiting, judging, hunting. At the far end of the hall sat Kael, upon his throne, silent, dangerous, untouchable, and beside him sat Elara. The position alone felt like a death sentence. The whispers grew louder. Some tried hiding them. Others didn't bother. She's just an Omega. Look at her. A servant would be more suitable. The king has lost his mind. The words stabbed deeper than blades. Elara lowered her gaze. Years of rejection rushed back. The memories hurt. The loneliness hurt. The shame hurt. Then suddenly silence spread through the hall. Every noble froze. Kael had stood. Slowly. Deliberately. The room immediately became colder. More dangerous. His silver eyes swept across the crowd. Predatory. Lethal. Anyone foolish enough to meet his gaze quickly looked away. Anyone who insults her again. His voice remained calm. That made it worse. Far worse. Will answer directly to me. The threat landed like thunder. Nobody doubted him. Not a single person. Kael Dreadfang never made empty threats. The banquet continued. But nobody spoke again. Elara stared at him. Confused. Why protect her? Why care? Why risk his authority for someone he barely knew? Across the hall, another pair of eyes watched the exchange. Cold. Calculating. Jealous. Lady Seraphine Vare, the king's closest advisor, and the woman who had spent 3 years believing she would eventually become queen. Her smile never faded, but something ugly moved behind it. Something poisonous. Something dangerous. The arrival of Elara Frost had shattered years of planning, and Seraphine did not tolerate obstacles. The days that followed changed Moonfang Castle. At first nobody noticed. Then suddenly everyone did. Wounded soldiers recovered faster. Arguments ended peacefully. Servants smiled more. The wolves roaming the castle grounds became calmer. Even the atmosphere felt lighter, warmer, as if spring itself had somehow entered winter. The center of every change remained the same. Elara. The effect terrified some people, inspired others, and fascinated Kael. Night after night, he found himself watching her. Not intentionally. At least that was what he told himself. Yet somehow his eyes always found her. In the gardens, in the library, among the wolves. She treated everyone with kindness, even those who despised her. Especially those who despised her. It made no sense. Strength he understood. Power he respected. Cruelty he expected. But kindness? Kindness confused him, because he had forgotten it existed. One night, Kael awoke suddenly, breathing hard. Sweat covered his skin. For years nightmares had haunted him, always the same. Blood, death, failure, his former mate dying in his arms. Every night, every year, every memory. Yet, tonight, there had been nothing. No nightmares, no ghosts, only peace. The realization unsettled him, because the last thing he remembered before sleeping was Elara's laughter echoing through the castle courtyard. And somehow that sound had followed him into his dreams. Days later, Seraphine entered the royal archives. Alone, silent, determined. Dust floated through ancient sunlight. Forgotten histories lined endless shelves. She searched for hours, then finally found what she wanted. A hidden family record. An ancient bloodline registry. Her eyes scanned the faded pages. Suddenly, she stopped. The smile slowly disappeared from her face, then returned, much darker than before, much more dangerous, because written inside those forgotten records was a name, a bloodline, a secret. And if the information was true, Elara Frost was descended from one of the kingdom's greatest enemies. Seraphine's heart raced, not with fear, with opportunity. She carefully closed the book, already planning, already calculating, already imagining Elara's downfall. Meanwhile, far above the archives, Elara stood alone on a castle balcony. Moonlight painted her pale hair silver. The wind danced across her skin. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. Hope. And behind her, unnoticed in the shadows, Kael watched quietly, unable to leave, unable to approach, unable to stop thinking about her, because every day the bond grew stronger, and every day resisting it became harder. Then suddenly pain flashed through his chest. Sharp, violent, ancient. The same warning his wolf gave before disaster. Kael's eyes narrowed instantly. Somewhere inside the castle, someone had just made their first move against his mate, and neither of them knew how dangerous the game had become. Waiting, judging, hunting. At the far end of the hall sat Kael, upon his throne, silent, dangerous, untouchable, and beside him sat Elara. The position alone felt like a death sentence. The whispers grew louder. Some tried hiding them. Others didn't bother. She's just an Omega. Look at her. A servant would be more suitable. The king has lost his mind. The words stabbed deeper than blades. Elara lowered her gaze. Years of rejection rushed back. The memories hurt. The loneliness hurt. The shame hurt. Then suddenly silence spread through the hall. Every noble froze. Kael had stood. Slowly. Deliberately. The room immediately became colder. More dangerous. His silver eyes swept across the crowd. Predatory. Lethal. Anyone foolish enough to meet his gaze quickly looked away. Anyone who insults her again. His voice remained calm. That made it worse. Far worse. Will answer directly to me. The threat landed like thunder. Nobody doubted him. Not a single person. Kael Dreadfang never made empty threats. The banquet continued. But nobody spoke again. Elara stared at him, confused. Why protect her? Why care? Why risk his authority for someone he barely knew? Across the hall, another pair of eyes watched the exchange. Cold, calculating, jealous. Lady Seraphine Vare, the king's closest advisor, and the woman who had spent 3 years believing she would eventually become queen. Her smile never faded, but something ugly moved behind it. Something poisonous. Something dangerous. The arrival of Elara Frost had shattered years of planning, and Seraphine did not tolerate obstacles. The days that followed changed Moonfang Castle. At first nobody noticed. Then suddenly everyone did. Wounded soldiers recovered faster. Arguments ended peacefully. Servants smiled more. The wolves roaming the castle grounds became calmer. Even the atmosphere felt lighter, warmer. As if spring itself had somehow entered winter. The center of every change remained the same. Elara. The effect terrified some people, inspired others, and fascinated Kael. Night after night, he found himself watching her. Not intentionally. At least that was what he told himself. Yet somehow his eyes always found her. In the gardens, in the library, among the wolves. She treated everyone with kindness. Even those who despised her. Especially those who despised her. It made no sense. Strength he understood. Power he respected. Cruelty he expected. But kindness? Kindness confused him. Because he had forgotten it existed. One night, Kael awoke suddenly. Breathing hard. Sweat covered his skin. For years nightmares had haunted him. Always the same. Blood. Death. Failure. His former mate dying in his arms. Every night, every year, every memory. Yet, tonight, there had been nothing. No nightmares. No ghosts. Only peace. The realization unsettled him. Because the last thing he remembered before sleeping was Elara's laughter echoing through the castle courtyard. And somehow that sound had followed him into his dreams. Days later, Seraphine entered the royal archives. Alone,
Silent.
determined. Dust floated through ancient sunlight. Forgotten histories lined endless shelves. She searched for hours, then finally found what she wanted. A hidden family record. An ancient bloodline registry. Her eyes scanned the faded pages. Suddenly, she stopped. The smile slowly disappeared from her face, then returned, much darker than before, much more dangerous, because written inside those forgotten records was a name, a bloodline, a secret. And if the information was true, Elara Frost was descended from one of the kingdom's greatest enemies. Seraphine's heart raced, not with fear, with opportunity. She carefully closed the book, already planning, already calculating, already imagining Elara's downfall. Meanwhile, far above the archives, Elara stood alone on a castle balcony. Moonlight painted her pale hair silver. The wind danced across her skin. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar.
Hope.
And behind her, unnoticed in the shadows, Kael watched quietly, unable to leave, unable to approach, unable to stop thinking about her. Because every day the bond grew stronger, and every day resisting it became harder. Then suddenly pain flashed through his chest. Sharp, violent, ancient. The same warning his wolf gave before disaster. Kael's eyes narrowed instantly. Somewhere inside the castle, someone had just made their first move against his mate, and neither of them knew how dangerous the game had become. The silence was worse than the screams. Moments earlier, the castle had been alive with music. Now it felt like a tomb. Frozen, watching, judging. The body of the royal guard lay motionless upon the marble floor. Blood spread beneath him like a dark shadow. Torches flickered against stone walls. Nobles stared in horror. And at the center of it all stood Elara. Blood covered her hands. Blood stained the silver gown she had worn only hours earlier. Blood transformed every accusation into something terrifyingly believable. Her heartbeat thundered inside her ears. She couldn't understand what had happened. One moment she had been walking through the eastern corridor. The next, darkness. A strange dizziness. A blur. Then screaming. And now,
This.
the dead guard. The terrified faces. The unbearable silence. Kael. Her voice cracked. The Alpha King stood several feet away, motionless. His silver eyes remained locked on hers, searching, calculating, fighting. She had never seen him look so conflicted. For the first time since they met, uncertainty lived inside his gaze. And that hurt more than any accusation, because she trusted him, against all logic, against all experience. Somewhere along the way, she had begun believing he would stand beside her. Now she wasn't sure. A nobleman finally spoke. She's guilty. The words shattered the silence. Another voice followed. The evidence is obvious. Look at her hands. Look at the body. She's a witch. She's cursed. The crowd erupted. Fear transformed into outrage. Outrage transformed into hatred. Elara felt herself shrinking beneath it. The same feeling she had known her entire life. Different faces. Different location. Same cruelty. Kael's jaw tightened. A growl rumbled deep inside his chest. The sound instantly silenced the room. Fear spread through the nobles. Nobody wanted the king's attention, especially when he looked like this. Dangerous. Unstable. Predatory. His gaze returned to Elara. For several endless seconds, neither spoke. Then Kael gave an order. Take her to her chambers. Shock swept through the crowd. Not prison. Not execution. Her chambers. A small act of mercy. Yet somehow it felt worse. Because uncertainty remained alive. And uncertainty could kill love faster than hatred ever could. The following days became a nightmare. Moonfang Castle transformed into a battlefield of whispers. Every corridor carried rumors. Every room held accusations. The kingdom demanded answers. The nobles demanded punishment. The people demanded justice. And Seraphine carefully guided every conversation, like a puppeteer pulling invisible strings. Evidence continued appearing. Witnesses emerged. Letters were discovered. Records surfaced. Each piece pointed toward Elara. Each piece strengthened the illusion. Each piece had been planted. But nobody knew that. Nobody except Seraphine. And she intended to keep it that way. Inside her chambers, Elara sat beside a frost-covered window. 3 days. 3 days without freedom. 3 days without answers. 3 days without Kael. That hurt most of all. The king hadn't visited once. Not once. The absence felt deliberate. Personal. Painful. Outside, snow drifted across the castle grounds. The wolves still lingered below her balcony. Guarding. Waiting. Remaining loyal even when humans weren't. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened, and Kael entered. The room instantly felt smaller. His presence always did that. Power seemed to follow him. Fill every space. Consume every silence. Yet, tonight something felt different. He looked exhausted. Shadows darkened his eyes. Tension radiated from every movement. For several moments, neither spoke. The distance between them suddenly felt enormous. Elara finally broke the silence. Do you believe them? The question hung in the air. Simple. Terrifying. Kael's expression tightened. Because there was no safe answer.
No.
Relief appeared briefly. Then vanished. Because he continued speaking. But I don't understand what's happening. The words struck harder than a lie. Elara looked away. Pain flooded her chest. I don't understand either. Silence followed. The emotional bond that had once brought comfort now felt fractured. Fragile. Dangerously strained. Kael stepped closer. I am trying to protect you. A bitter laugh escaped her. By locking me away? His jaw clenched. By preventing the kingdom from tearing you apart. For the first time, anger flashed inside her eyes. Real anger. Not sadness. Not fear. Pain transformed into fire. And who protects me from them? Her voice trembled. Who protects me from the people calling me a monster? Kael didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Because somewhere deep inside himself, he feared he was failing. Again. Just like before. Just like the mate he couldn't save. The woman he lost. The guilt he carried every day. And now history felt ready to repeat itself. Meanwhile, Seraphine watched everything unfold perfectly. From her private chambers, she monitored the kingdom's growing outrage. The people were restless. The nobles demanded action. Pressure mounted from every direction. Exactly as planned. Soon even Kael would be forced to choose. His kingdom, or his mate. And Seraphine already knew which choice duty would demand. 1 week later, the royal tribunal convened. The great hall overflowed with nobles, military leaders, priests, and citizens. Thousands gathered. Thousands waited. Thousands judged. Snow battered the stained-glass windows. Thunder echoed across distant mountains. The atmosphere felt oppressive, like the kingdom itself held its breath. Elara stood alone before the throne. Chains were not necessary. The accusations already served that purpose. Kael sat above everyone. Upon the throne, a king. Not a mate. Not a man. A king. The distinction terrified him. Because kings made sacrifices. And sometimes sacrifice looked a lot like cruelty. The proceedings lasted hours. Witnesses testified. False evidence emerged. Forged letters appeared. Every lie strengthened the case. Every lie drove another blade into Elara's heart. She kept waiting. Waiting for truth. Waiting for justice. Waiting for Kael. But truth never came. Justice never arrived. And Kael remained silent. Because the more evidence appeared, the harder it became to fight. Not because he believed it. Because the kingdom did. And kingdoms could collapse when rulers ignored fear. Finally, the high priest stood. The hall fell silent. The accused stands condemned by evidence and public testimony. Elara's pulse stopped. The priest turned toward the throne. Your Majesty. The entire kingdom watched. Kael rose slowly. The movement felt heavy. Painful. Like lifting a mountain. His silver eyes found Elara's. The moment shattered both of them. Because she finally understood. The decision had already been made. Tears filled her eyes. Not from fear. From heartbreak. She had trusted him. And trust was always the most dangerous thing an Omega could give. Kael's voice echoed through the hall. Cold. Formal.
Broken.
Elara Frost. The name alone hurt. You are hereby exiled from Moonfang Kingdom. Silence followed. Absolute silence. Then Elara smiled. A small smile. A shattered smile. The kind born when hope finally dies. She nodded once. Slowly. As if accepting something she had feared all along. Then she lowered her gaze. And said the words that would haunt Kael forever. I understand. But she didn't. Not really. And neither did he. The morning of her exile arrived beneath an iron-gray sky. Snow drifted through the palace courtyard. Soldiers lined the walls. Citizens gathered silently. Nobody celebrated. Nobody cheered. Even victory felt wrong. Elara stood at the gates carrying only a small travel pack. The wolves surrounded the courtyard. Restless. Agitated. Whining softly. As though they understood something terrible was happening. Kael watched from the palace steps. Every instinct screamed at him to stop this. To run after her. To choose her. To ignore the kingdom. To forget duty. To be selfish. For once. Just once. But duty had ruled his entire life. Duty always won. Elara looked at him one final time. Waiting.
Hoping.
Begging without words. Choose me. Fight for me. Tell me I matter. Tell me this was a mistake. Tell me our bond meant something. Kael didn't move. And that silence broke whatever remained between them. A tear slid down her cheek. Then she turned away. And walked into the storm. The wolves howled. A sound filled with grief. The gates slowly closed. And the moment they did, something inside Kael shattered. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And Moonfang Kingdom began dying. Crops failed beneath endless frost. Wolf packs turned violent. Villages reported strange attacks. Ancient protective magic weakened. The kingdom felt sick. Broken. Empty. As though something essential had been removed. Because it had. Kael spent every night standing upon the castle walls. Watching the horizon. Waiting. Regretting. The realization grew impossible to ignore. Exiling Elara had not saved the kingdom. It had cursed it. And the worst part? He missed her. Not as a mate. Not as a prophecy. As her. Her laughter. Her kindness. Her stubbornness. Her presence. The absence hurt more than any wound he had ever suffered. Far beyond Moonfang's borders, Elara wandered through frozen wilderness. Alone. Heartbroken. Changed. The girl who left the kingdom slowly disappeared. Pain reshaped her. Loss strengthened her. Survival hardened her. One night, following strange dreams and whispers carried by moonlight, she discovered something impossible. Ancient ruins buried beneath ice. Forgotten. Hidden. Waiting. Massive stone pillars emerged from snow. Silver symbols glowed across weathered walls. The air hummed with power. Ancient.
Sleeping. Alive.
As Elara stepped forward, the crescent mark beneath her collarbone suddenly ignited. Brilliant silver light exploded across the ruins. The ground trembled. The sky darkened. And voices older than kingdoms whispered her name. At last, the truth was awakening. And the power buried within her bloodline was far greater than anyone had imagined. The ruins had no name. No kingdom claimed them. No maps recorded their existence. They existed beyond history, beyond memory, beyond the reach of ordinary men. For centuries, they had slept beneath glaciers and storms, waiting for the return of a bloodline the world believed extinct. And now they had awakened. Silver light flooded the frozen valley. Ancient symbols blazed across towering stone pillars. The ground trembled beneath Elara's feet. The crescent mark beneath her collarbone burned like liquid moonfire. Pain surged through her body. Not destructive. Transformative. The sensation felt like chains breaking. Like something ancient finally breathing after centuries of silence. Then the voices came. Soft at first. Whispers carried through the snow. 1,000 forgotten souls speaking at once. Daughter of the moon. Elara froze. The valley itself seemed alive. The air vibrated. The ruins glowed brighter. And suddenly she was no longer standing alone. Figures appeared around her. Transparent.
Silver.
Ancient spirits formed from moonlight and memory.
Kings. Queens.
Warriors.
Mystics.
An entire lost civilization. Watching. Waiting. Recognizing her. Tears filled Elara's eyes. Not from fear. From belonging. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being rejected. She wasn't being judged. She wasn't being abandoned. She was being welcomed. One spirit stepped forward. A woman wearing a silver crown. Her pale eyes mirrored Elara's own. The blood remembers. The voice echoed through the valley. Elara's heart pounded. Who are you? The spirit smiled sadly. The answer you have searched for your entire life. The woman raised a hand. Moonlight erupted across the ruins. Suddenly memories flooded Elara's mind. Ancient wars. Forgotten kingdoms. Betrayals hidden from history. And one devastating truth. Her bloodline had never been cursed. It had been feared. The lunar dynasty had once protected the north. Their magic maintained balance between kingdoms, wolves, and nature itself. But ambitious rulers feared their power. So they destroyed them, murdered them, erased them, then rewrote history, turning victims into villains, turning protectors into monsters. Elara staggered backward. The realization shattered everything she believed about herself. Her entire life had been built upon a lie. And Moonfang Kingdom had helped spread it, including Kael. Especially Kael. Pain surged through her chest. The wound he left behind reopened instantly. The spirit seemed to sense it. The king broke your heart. Elara looked away. Silence answered. The spirit nodded. Pain can destroy people. The valley darkened. The winds intensified. Moonlight danced across Elara's pale skin. Or it can transform them. The power inside her awakened completely. Months passed. Winter deepened. And Moonfang Kingdom continued falling apart. The kingdom no longer resembled the empire Kael once ruled. Villages suffered. Trade collapsed. Wolf attacks increased. Fear spread everywhere. The people whispered about curses, prophecies, divine punishment. They weren't entirely wrong. Something fundamental had vanished the day Elara left. And everyone felt it, including the king, especially the king. Kael stood alone upon the highest balcony of Moonfang Castle. Snow drifted around him. The wind howled across the mountains. Far below, thousands of lights illuminated the sleeping capital. Yet despite the city's beauty, everything felt hollow, empty,
Cold.
Months had passed since Elara's exile.
Months.
And somehow every day felt worse than the one before. The loneliness had become unbearable. He missed her. Not as destiny. Not as prophecy. As a person. A woman who brought warmth into rooms without trying. A woman who made wolves gentle. A woman who made monsters remember they were human.
His jaw tightened.
Regret was a useless emotion. Kings couldn't afford regret. Yet it haunted him constantly. Because deep down he knew the truth. He had failed her. Just like he failed everyone he ever loved. A knock interrupted the silence. The door opened. General Roderick entered. The king's most trusted commander. His expression looked grim. Your Majesty.
Kael turned.
What happened? The general hesitated. Never a good sign. There are reports from the eastern border. Kael frowned. Bandits.
No.
The commander's eyes widened slightly. Something else. 3 days later, rumors exploded across Moonfang Kingdom. Travelers carried stories from village to village. Merchants repeated impossible tales. Soldiers argued about them in taverns. Nobody knew what to believe. Because the stories sounded absurd. An entire mountain had split apart during a storm. Frozen rivers suddenly flowed again. Ancient creatures were seen kneeling before a mysterious woman cloaked in silver light. Every report described the same person. A pale-haired woman. Moonlit eyes. Power beyond imagination. The Queen of Ashes. The title spread quickly, and with every passing day, the stories grew, until eventually they reached Moonfang Castle. And Kael. The moment he heard the description, his heart stopped. Because he knew. Before anyone said her name, he knew. The return happened beneath a sky black with storm clouds. Snow fell heavily across the capital. Thousands gathered outside the castle gates. Soldiers lined the walls. Nobles crowded balconies. Fear and anticipation filled the air. The gates remained closed. The kingdom held its breath. Then the storm changed. The wind stopped. Completely. An unnatural silence descended. Every person felt it. Every wolf sensed it. Every instinct screamed. Something powerful was approaching. A figure emerged through the falling snow. Then another. Then dozens more. Ancient wolf guardians walked beside her. Massive creatures larger than war horses. Their eyes glowed silver. Their presence radiated primal power. And at the center walked Elara.
No.
Not the Elara who left. That girl was gone. This woman carried herself differently. She moved with confidence, with certainty, with authority. Moonlight seemed to follow her. The snow itself parted around her footsteps. Her silver cloak flowed behind her like liquid starlight. And when she lifted her eyes toward the castle, the entire kingdom felt it.
Power. Pure.
Ancient.
Terrifying.
Beautiful. The gates opened automatically. Nobody had given the order. They simply opened, as though the castle itself recognized its rightful queen. Shock rippled through the crowd. Whispers erupted everywhere. Kael stood at the top of the palace stairs. Frozen. For several seconds, he forgot how to breathe. The woman approaching him looked familiar, yet entirely different. Stronger. Colder. Untouchable. And for the first time since becoming king, Kael felt nervous. Because now the power between them had shifted. Months ago, she had sought his approval, his protection, his affection. Now, she needed none of it. The realization struck harder than any battlefield wound. Elara reached the palace steps. Silence consumed the courtyard. Thousands watched, waiting. Kael stepped forward. His heartbeat thundered. Elara. The name escaped almost as a prayer. She looked at him. Expression unreadable. Emotionless. The distance in her gaze cut deeper than hatred ever could. Your Majesty. The formal title landed like a blade. Kael flinched internally. The crowd noticed. For the first time, people saw something impossible. The Alpha King looked vulnerable. Elara continued climbing the stairs, passing him, not stopping, not hesitating, not asking permission, because she no longer needed permission. The wolves followed. Ancient spirits seemed to move within the shadows around her. And suddenly, everyone understood. The exiled Omega had returned. But the woman standing before them now possessed enough power to destroy kingdoms. Or save them. That night, Lady Seraphine Vare locked herself inside her chambers. Fear had finally arrived. Real fear. The kind she hadn't experienced in years. Because Elara's return changed everything. The kingdom loved legends. And Elara had become one. Worse. She had become powerful. Powerful enough to uncover secrets. Dangerous enough to expose lies. Seraphine moved quickly, opening hidden drawers, removing secret documents, burning evidence, destroying records. But panic makes mistakes. And tonight she made one. A single letter slipped from her desk. One forgotten document. One piece of proof. Enough proof. Hours later, deep within the royal archives, Elara stood beside ancient records illuminated by moonlight. The evidence rested in her hands. Every forged document. Every planted witness. Every manipulation. Every betrayal. All leading back to one person. Seraphine. The truth finally stood exposed. And as Elara stared at the evidence, her eyes slowly lifted toward the dark castle beyond the window. Because now she faced a far more difficult question. What would hurt more? Destroying the woman who betrayed her? Or confronting the man who allowed it? Behind her, thunder shook the kingdom. The storm had arrived. And before it ended, Moonfang would drown in war. The storm arrived at midnight. not the kind born from clouds, the kind born from truth. Thunder rolled across Moonfang Kingdom as if the heavens themselves sensed what was coming. Lightning illuminated the black towers of the castle. Rain mixed with snow. The wind screamed against stone walls. And beneath the darkness, a kingdom stood on the edge of collapse. Because secrets always demanded payment. And tonight, every debt would be collected. Elara stood alone inside the ancient throne room. Moonlight spilled through towering stained glass windows. Silver symbols glowed faintly beneath her skin. The evidence rested in her hands. Letters, witness payments, forged orders, records of bribes. Every lie, every manipulation, every betrayal. Months of suffering reduced to ink on paper. Her fingers tightened. Pain stirred inside her chest. Not because of Seraphine, because of Kael. The woman had orchestrated the betrayal, but Kael had allowed it. He had chosen duty over her, chosen fear over trust, chosen silence over love. The wounds remained. Even now, especially now, a soft sound echoed behind her. Footsteps. Heavy. Familiar.
Kael.
Elara didn't turn around. She already knew it was him. The bond between them had become impossible to ignore. Months apart had weakened nothing. If anything, the separation had made it stronger. More painful. More dangerous. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them, filled with regret, memories,
Loss.
Finally, Kael stopped several feet behind her, close enough to feel her presence, far enough to respect the distance she had built. I know the truth. His voice sounded rough, tired, older somehow. Elara stared toward the throne. The truth arrived too late. The words struck him harder than any blade. Because they were true, painfully true. Kael lowered his head. For perhaps the first time in his life, the Alpha King had no defense. No excuse. No justification. Only guilt. And guilt was a cruel companion. Elsewhere inside the castle, Lady Seraphine Vare made her final move. Panic had become desperation. Desperation had become madness. The moment she realized Elara possessed evidence, she abandoned caution entirely. If she couldn't become queen, nobody would. If she couldn't rule Moonfang, she would destroy it. Her agents moved through the capital. Hidden supporters within noble houses activated. False reports spread through military barracks. Assassins entered strategic positions. By dawn, half the kingdom believed Kael had betrayed them. The other half believed Elara planned to seize the throne. Chaos erupted instantly. Fighting broke out across the city. Allies turned against allies. Neighbors turned against neighbors. Fear became violence. Violence became war. And Moonfang began tearing itself apart, exactly as Seraphine intended. The first explosion shook the castle before sunrise. The floor trembled violently. Windows shattered. Screams echoed through the corridors. Elara and Kael turned simultaneously. Another explosion followed. Then another. Smoke rose from the capital below. Flames illuminated the darkness. War had arrived. Kael immediately moved toward the doors. Instinct.
Duty.
Protection. The king inside him activated instantly. But Elara stepped forward. The silver mark on her collarbone ignited. Ancient power surged through the room. Moonlight exploded across the walls. The air vibrated. Every torch extinguished. Kael froze. For a brief moment, he saw her clearly. Not as an Omega. Not as his mate. Not even as a queen. But as something far older. A force capable of changing history itself. Their eyes met. And despite everything, despite betrayal, despite heartbreak, despite months of suffering, the bond remained. Unbroken. Elara finally spoke. We end this together. Kael's heartbeat stopped. Together. The word felt like forgiveness. Not complete forgiveness. Not yet. But hope. For the first time in months, hope. The battle consumed the capital. Snow and ash fell together from the sky. Citizens fled burning streets. Soldiers clashed beneath shattered banners. Wolf packs raced through the city. The entire kingdom seemed caught between destruction and salvation. At the center of the chaos stood Seraphine, upon the grand plaza, surrounded by loyal followers. Her elegant appearance had vanished. Only obsession remained. Only hatred. Only ambition. When she saw Elara approaching through the storm, something inside her finally broke. Years of jealousy erupted. Years of frustration. Years of entitlement. "You ruined everything." Her scream echoed across the battlefield. Elara continued walking.
Calm.
Controlled. Powerful.
No.
The answer came softly. "You ruined yourself." The words struck deeper than any weapon, because they were true, and Seraphine knew it. For a moment the woman's confidence cracked. Only for a moment. Then rage consumed her completely. She drew a hidden blade. The same blade responsible for countless murders. The same blade that had triggered every tragedy. And lunged. Everything happened at once. The crowd screamed. Soldiers moved. Chaos erupted. But Seraphine never reached Elara. Kael intercepted her. The Alpha King stepped directly between them. The blade pierced his side. Blood splashed across the snow. The world froze. Elara's heart stopped. For one horrifying second, she saw another future. A future where she lost him forever. A future where history repeated itself.
No.
Not again. Never again. The power inside her exploded. Moonlight erupted across the battlefield. The ground trembled. Silver energy surged through the city. The storm itself seemed to kneel. Everyone watched in stunned silence. Ancient lunar magic spread outward like a living ocean. It revealed everything. Every lie. Every memory. Every crime. The truth became visible for all to see. Seraphine's conspiracies. Her forged evidence. Her assassinations. Her manipulations. Nothing remained hidden. The entire kingdom witnessed it simultaneously. Gasps spread through the crowd. Shock became outrage. Outrage became judgment. The woman who spent years controlling everyone suddenly stood exposed. Alone.
For the first time in her life.
Seraphine stared at the people surrounding her. The kingdom she tried to manipulate. The king she tried to possess. The woman she tried to destroy. And finally understood. She had lost.
Completely.
The guards moved forward. This time nobody stopped them. By sunset, the war was over. The fires slowly died. The wounded received aid. The kingdom began healing. But one final battle remained. The most important battle. The one neither sword nor magic could solve. Night fell quietly. For the first time in months, peace returned to Moonfang Castle. The ruined throne room stood illuminated by moonlight. Broken stone covered the floor. Cracked banners hung from damaged walls. A kingdom rebuilding itself. Much like the two people standing within it. Elara stood before the shattered throne.
Silent.
Thoughtful. The silver moon glowed beyond the windows. Then Kael entered. Alone. No guards. No crown. No armor. Just a man. A broken man. A man who had made terrible mistakes. The distance between them felt smaller than before. Yet somehow more important. Kael stopped several feet away. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. The woman who had changed everything. The woman he loved. The woman he failed. Then something impossible happened. The Alpha King lowered himself to one knee. Silence filled the room. The gesture carried more power than any battlefield victory. More power than any royal decree. Because everyone knew what it meant. Kael Dreadfang, the beast of the north. The king who bowed before no one. Had chosen humility. Had chosen love. Had chosen her. His voice broke the silence. I failed you. No excuses. No defenses. Only truth. Elara's eyes widened slightly. Kael continued. I allowed fear to speak louder than trust. Moonlight reflected in his silver eyes. I allowed duty to become an excuse for cowardice. The words trembled.
Raw. Honest.
Painful. If you never forgive me, his voice cracked. I will understand. The sight shattered something inside Elara. Because this wasn't a king. This wasn't an alpha. This wasn't a ruler. This was a man exposing every wound he carried. A man offering complete freedom.
Complete choice.
No demands. No expectations. Only love. For several moments, silence ruled the room. Then Elara slowly stepped forward. Kael looked up. Hope and fear battled inside his gaze. The most powerful man in the north looked terrified. Terrified of her answer. Elara knelt before him. Their eyes met. And gently, very gently, she touched his face. The same face she once thought she'd never see again. The same man she hated.
Missed. Loved.
All at once. Tears filled her eyes. Not from sadness. From healing. You hurt me. Kael closed his eyes. The truth hurt, but he accepted it. Elara's fingers remained against his skin. And I almost let that pain define me. A small smile appeared.
Soft.
Real. But we're both more than our worst mistakes. The words shattered the final walls between them. Kael's breath trembled. Elara leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. The bond surged.
Warm. Whole. Complete.
Not because destiny demanded it, because they chose it. Together. 1 year later, Moonfang Kingdom flourished. Winter no longer felt endless. The wolves roamed peacefully. The people prospered. And upon the rebuilt throne sat 2 rulers. Not a king and his mate. Not an alpha and an omega. Equals. Partners. A queen forged by suffering. A king redeemed through love. And beneath the light of a silver moon, the abandoned girl who once woke surrounded by wolves finally found what she had searched for her entire life. Home. The end wolf face crown crescent moon red heart.